Our next panel is a media and journalism powerhouse. But before I introduce them, I just want to remind all of you that we have many resources at acttochange.org, and our resources are translated into multiple languages, and offer information on how to respond to and how to combat bullying in your communities. I also got a text during this that our donations are up to $5,200, so we're a third of the way to the goal. So if you are able to donate, please visit acttochange.org/donate. Okay, I am so excited about this panel. Please join me in welcoming author, journalist, and the host of CNN's This Is Life with Lisa Ling. Lisa Ling, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We also have editor-in-chief of Allure magazine, Michelle Lee. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And we have the co-founder of Gold House and founder of Ohm Group, Bing Chen. Hey, Bing.
Hi, thanks for having me, Malik. What's up, brother?
It's so good to see you guys. Wow, there's a lot of talent on the screen right now. It makes me a little crazy.
Same.
So all of you work in media in some fashion or journalism, but you also are doing very diverse things. So I wanted to ask each of you, and we'll just go around the square, I guess. I wanted to ask each of you, what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing in the media right now befalling our communities? And I don't know what view you guys have, but I'll just go in the order of the view that I have. So Lisa, if you can go first.
Well, Malik, it's interesting you asked that question because Bing Chen and I were talking last week, and we were just lamenting the fact that things were actually going so well. Thanks to people like Bing and his organization Gold House, and this incredible mobilization that was happening around Asian-led projects in the media. It was so exciting. And as someone who has worked in the media for about 35 years, long before you all were born, it was a source of excitement and pride that I had never really experienced with, the successes of so many of these projects. And so, now we find ourselves in a totally different world, and I don't know what is going to happen, but it is concerning that in an instant things can change in the way that they have, and that our Asianness, our Americanness, is being questioned even at the highest levels. I mean, I don't think there is an intentional objective to demonize Asian Americans, but I think people at the highest levels have to realize that there are consequences of speech and of language and how you characterize things. And my fear also is that this is an election year, and given the conflict between the U.S. and China and this contentious relationship that is brewing, my hope is that it doesn't get worse for people who look like us throughout the next year, but just given how volatile rhetoric has been, particularly by this administration, it's something that I'm tremendously concerned about.
I appreciate what you said, and I would maybe venture out to say that there probably is some calculated demonizing. At least that's the way it sometimes seems. But I appreciate you saying that. And I want to talk more about some of the ways you think we can counteract that. But let me get to Michelle and Bing as well. Michelle, what do you think is the biggest challenge happening in the media around our communities right now?
I think the biggest challenge right now is just that any discussions of race have been so politicized, and that part of the audience will just immediately shut off at any mention of race. And it's such a dangerous thing because even though, like Lisa said, things were going great, like I felt like we had this momentum behind us of so many more Asian-led projects and things were going so well, we still, to be honest with you, are so underrepresented in media, in Hollywood and other places that when you have that lack of representation, it still just opens the door for people to misunderstand our cultures. So that's when you see people talking about how Chinese people eat such weird food. We all eat bats. We all eat dogs. And, all of these crazy old stereotypes that I had felt like were long gone before. And I loved listening to Hudson and Jeannie talk right before us because I feel like I share so many of the same memories as they have I also in middle school was bullied horribly, and that was 30 years ago. So I felt like finally we've like moved past this, and so quickly it's just so sad to see that we're kind of back where we started again.
Yeah, and that's probably a great starting point to then come to you, Bing, because I know that you've done so much work around media and representation, and so I'm curious if you echo the thoughts that Lisa and Michelle put out, or if you have some other thoughts on what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, they're both much smarter than I am, so I definitely agree with everything that's been said.
I don't know that. I don't know.
It's definitely
think so.
true. It's definitely true. No, but I think the only other two things I add are one, and Lisa and I were actually talking about this last week. Our race has two nations. We have a loyalty, commitment, and heritage in the motherland in Asia, and then we also have a loyalty, commitment, and fervor for the United States. And we are unfortunately stuck in the middle. And how do we circumvent that, or how do we surmount that, given all the essential questions that are going around of who is culpable, who's responsible for finding a solution, is really hard, because we have to play both sides. We have to be in the middle. The second thing that I think candidly has been very irksome, and actually, to be honest, Michelle and Lisa are two of these sort of paradigms of sort of the best version of this, is we need more heroes and we need to celebrate our heroes. I mean, you have two people here who have gone out of their way and candidly did not have to not only embrace the mainstream, as it were, in their work, but also the Asian community. And I think we need to see more of that. I think too often we still see Asian on Asian hate. And to be clear, I think it's okay and appropriate and sometimes essential for us to critique each other. But my challenge is, while every voice is worthy, I think sometimes we need to get off our high horses and thinking that just because we exist, we deserve to be seen equally at all times in the same way by everyone. Because what happens when we start doing that publicly and attacking each other publicly in the community is that the old majority benefits. Because suddenly they can look at us, and suddenly whenever they want to support us, they now have the caveat before they support us. And that's problematic, especially when too much of the sort of mainstream community sees us all as one, the same, in a monolith, even though we're not. So I think that's the second piece of, we have to celebrate and educate our heroes in productive, actionable ways, as opposed to sort of clawing each other down before we've even made it.
And we also, to underscore what Bing is saying, this is a moment right now. We are in the midst of something totally unprecedented, and the attacks on Asians has risen exponentially. And this is a moment when, we want other communities to stand up for us as well, right? And so we also have to stand up for racism against everyone.
That's
right. I mean,
right.
this is a moment when leaders are going to rise up and emerge, and it's so important that we start speaking out against injustices that are happening in communities across the board, because we have to speak in a unified voice if we're ever going to be able to overcome this.
I would love to just hop in here around that, because I think historically, a lot of minority or marginalized communities have sort of felt like there's only this much of the pie I can have, and I've got to fight for it. If I share with anyone else, I'm not going to get my piece of the pie, right? And I feel like we're at a moment in time in history where we are realizing that we all must actually be united. Not to plug the title of today, but that united we stand, right? And so I really appreciate you all bringing that up, not only within our Asian communities, but for all communities who might need support and might be suffering. And Michelle, I wanted to pivot to you, because you've done and all of you have, but you have done some amazing work around bringing diversity to the forefront. And I'm sure people probably already know this, but I just want to highlight that you've been dispelling beauty myths with Allure magazine. You banned the use of the word anti-aging in the magazine. You brought in a trans editor in Janet Mock, and you were the first major U.S. magazine to feature a woman in a hijab on the cover. And these are groundbreaking things. And so, I guess my question to you is why, and second of all, did being Asian American drive any of your decisions around these momentous events?
Yeah, I definitely think that being Asian American absolutely led those decisions. And I think part of it was that feeling of feeling underrepresented. And I remember for a long time, before I was an editor-in-chief, feeling like, why are we not represented out there? And so when I came into a position of having a platform, I still felt frustrated. But then when I actually looked inward and said, well, why am I not doing it? And it was just this like light bulb moment where I said, if I'm also not doing it, I'm part of the problem. So, as Lisa was saying too, it is not all about, I as an Asian American am not only going to put Asian Americans on the cover, right? Like, it's so important for us to really recognize that there's so much in the world of diversity. At the same time, when it comes to Asian Americans too, I looked back at the past 28 years of Allure, and on the cover, we had only featured 2 Asian women on the cover. It was Lucy Liu and Olivia Munn. And so last year, we actually put 3 Asian women on one cover. It was 3 Asian American models, and it was gorgeous. And it was this historic moment where it, again, was just this light bulb moment of where I said, if I'm not going to be the one to do it, who is actually going to do it? So I think it's very important for us to not only build allies in the world, but also to show people that we have the opportunity to help shape culture. And if we're showing to our audience, this is what the image of beauty is, we have this opportunity to do so much more than just to sell a beautiful cover. It is truly, we are changing the world.
I talked about this a little bit with Daniel Day Kim earlier in today's event about, as a kid, feeling that that I wanted to be more American, and this idea of what American meant. And I think that part of that is because we so rarely see images on the covers of magazines or on billboards or on television or in film as lead characters or as sort of the all-American person. In fact, for the longest time in my career, it was like, if you look like this, which I do, then you're going to be playing the funny sidekick or the character we laugh at. You are not, I literally did a show where I was the foreign exchange student, and the lead character was classic all-American, blonde, built, and I was the weird guy who he has to live with at the boarding school. And so anyway, I appreciate the work that you're doing around that. Bing, maybe I'll flip to you just to build off of that. I know that you've done a lot of work around representation in the media, uplifting Asian voices. And not only that, I know that you've done a lot of work around uplifting Asian businesses as well. And it seems to me like there's something in there about integrating our culture into our American culture into American culture. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I think about our culture and American culture is our culture is human culture, period, right? The promise of America is no different from the promise of being a free human being. It's being Asian, it's being Christian, it's being Muslim, it's being undocumented, it's being gay, it's being straight, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think all of this is just about freeing ourselves for what we deserve. I think to go to how we actually get there, I mean, no one to piggyback off what Jeannie astutely said earlier, no one has a real solution to racism because it's persisted for centuries. That being said, I do think there are 2 ways that we start. So one that Lisa alluded to earlier, that Malik, you also mentioned, is even though the origin and nature of the racism against the Asian community is distinct from that of other communities. By the way, asterisk, the Latino community, the Black community still suffer from the highest mortality and unemployment rates still. Also, by the way, undocumented immigrants also. Despite that being different, I think the way that we solve it is actually going to be somewhat similar. And that's why, even though we didn't ask for this form of racism, it is incumbent on us to proactively reach out to other communities and see how we can support them and be consistent in our support for Mr. Arbery, for others. I think the second piece is awareness is really half the battle. The other half is action. I don't think the Asian community, the whole stereotypical, we don't speak up because we don't want it, we want to be apolitical and keep, that's a generational issue. My generation does not have that problem. We have no problem being loud. The issue is we are not aware of what's going on all the time. And more importantly, we don't know how to act practically against it. Do we sign a petition? Does the petition do anything? If we tweet, where does it go? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the twofold here is, one, across our communities, we need some sort of like alert system where if something egregious happens, we are all on message. We all have the hashtag. We all know color change is a great petition. We got to go sign that, right? And then secondly, beyond that, what else do we need to do?
And I guess what I would say to that is, this is it's a pretty educated community. It's a I mean, I'm not to make gross generalizations, but it's one that is quite ambitious, is good at finding out information. And again, as I said earlier, like, this is a moment, and we need to be proactive about finding those stories, about telling those stories. I mean, the fact that so many Asian young people don't know who Vincent Chin is, or don't know who Helen Zia is, who you had in the beginning of the show, to me is a travesty. It's so important to know our history, because the fact of the matter is, American history has not been kind to Asians, and it's so important that we have that context, and not just Asian American history in this country, but to recognize injustices that have befallen so many communities. And now we all have platforms. This is, you were asking about what can journalists do, but we all have platforms now. And so it's really important that we use those platforms. I mean, something has changed now since COVID, right? And we have a choice of whether we want to use our platforms to continue selling stuff or promoting ourselves, right? Or use our platforms in productive ways so that we can speak out against injustices or highlight the really salient and important things that have happened in different communities across the board.
Lisa, I know on you speaking of using your platform in social media, you have been vocal about the fact that people were making racist and hurtful remarks, and I think even threatening your children. I don't remember the specifics, but I'd love to hear you talk about that. And I remember that you said that people told you to just don't bring attention to it, don't call it out. Yeah. And you said that it was important that we do call it out. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like Michelle and Hudson and Jeannie said earlier, when I was growing up, I was teased mercilessly about being Asian because I grew up in a non-diverse community. I was called Risa Ring. That was my nickname for most of my life, but it was never really malicious. These days, the messages that I'm getting, the messages that are proliferating, the things that are happening to Asian people it's ugly and it's vile and it's ignorant. And as Jeannie said earlier, it sounds cliche, but hurt people hurt people. And we have to recognize that this is a scary time for all of us. People are hurting and people are wanting to blame others. And we can't sweep these things under the rug. We have to not only speak out about them and speak out against them, but we also have to start having dialogue with people who are different from us. And that's what I've tried to devote my whole career to. I think it's so easy for us to on social media, for example, follow only the people who espouse the same views as us. Well, as a result, your view becomes pretty myopic. How are you any different than the people living in North Korea who are prevented from knowing what's happening around the world? And so I think it's incumbent upon us to not only try and to learn more about what's happening in the rest of the world and in this country, but to engage and start having dialogue, productive dialogue with people who are different from us so that we can kind of come together and start figuring out how we can address a lot of these issues.
I would love to also ask you, because I know that the danger, I guess, what is the danger in speaking up, right? And I think that the danger in speaking up and putting out something like that is that, especially in the social media world, you're going to get trolls, you're going to get people who are going to double down on the hurtful comments, and then also the vulnerability, and so I'm curious, have you seen a backlash to being vocal on social media, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, I'll go first. Yes, I have seen a bit of a backlash because social media, people often feel compelled to respond when they get upset with something that you've said or want to say something nasty. And so there definitely has been a backlash among a certain demographic, but overwhelmingly, there has been such incredible support and allies emerging who are appalled by this kind of behavior. And again, that's another reason why we need to keep putting it out there, to just make everyone aware that this is going on so that we can all take steps to combat it.
Yeah, I would say that also. I really think that what's complicated for me is that being the head of a brand, I can speak from my own opinion, but then my own opinion somehow becomes the brand's opinion. And so that seems to be a little bit of the challenge. I think that when I've been really vocal, though, it's only been positive. Like Lisa said, honestly, you have a couple of the trolls, you have some negative comments. I wrote a letter right after the election, actually, about racism and about how I was really terrified that with our new president, that the rise of racism was going to get very scary. And I had some actual snail mail letters written to me. And I remember thinking, if someone is offended by me writing about racism, maybe I don't want them in our audience. And I think that, I think it is that thing of where those couple of voices are okay. I'm fine dealing with it. I'm an adult and we can handle it.
That's great. Bang, Yeah.
No, I was just going to laud both of them. I mean, I'm not trying to be sycophantic, but this is where we have to repeat what Michelle said earlier. You know, if it's not for people like Michelle and Lisa and DDK and Jeannie and Hudson and so forth, if it's not them, then who is it going to be? And to what Lisa said earlier, if it's not happening now, when and how long? Right. So I think this is what courage looks like. This is unfortunately what it's going to take. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, either you're down with it and you're going to move with us, or you're not. The end.
This is, by the way, I think, so important. Obviously at Act to Change, we're focused on young people and the ways that they're being bullied, and by bullying, I mean, not only verbally, but physically attacked or hurt in other ways. And so, but cyberbullying is a big piece of that. And so I think it's really important for them to hear that it's something that you are also dealing with, and that you're still continuing to have a voice and put yourself out there. And I hope that if there's young people who are watching today, that they find some solidarity in what you said. I'm so grateful for that. I do want to. So we started this off, and I think we've been pretty much talking about it, but we started with this off, and I feel like I heard a consistent thing from all three of you that in terms of sort of our place in the world as an Asian American community, we were at a certain place before COVID-19, and now it feels like we have fallen down to a place where we have to maybe climb back up. And I just want to ask you, we have, of course, talked about various ways to do this, but what are things that someone who is at home right now who wants to support or help or keep our communities thriving, what are things that they can be doing? And I know it's hard to do these conversations with so many people on a computer, so I'll just pick someone to go. Bing, how about we start with you?
No. I'm gonna spitball. I'll give you three. One is representation matters, period, because what people say is what they believe. So when you see someone like Lisa Ling on her daily show for COVID, when you see the next magazine from Michelle Leah-Valère, you need to buy it. You need to put it on. You don't have to watch it. It needs to be on, though, because we need to count the streams. We need to count the numbers. Because if we get the numbers up, then suddenly language starts to proliferate. Number two is success. Financial capacity matters because it sustains the reality of representation. So if you have a small and medium-sized business, especially if it's owned by a marginalized founder, you need to buy from them every single day. We all love McDonald's. We all love Pizza Hut. God praise pizza. But you should also be buying from SMBs, and you need to buy extra hard from them in the next 2 years, because that's how long at least it's going to take to get out of this economic rift. Number three is, I go back to what we said earlier. We need unity not only across all of our communities, but we need a system that activates all of us. I often, and I hate to use this hackney example, but it is the best one. The institution that is known as Black Twitter is so powerful. And so how do we institutionalize something as informed and rapid as that across the community so that we're all aware and that we're all consistently making thoughtful noise that is actionable afterwards?
Amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah, you did it. You did it. You got three in. I only asked for one.
You go now.
Lisa, what about you?
I would just say to the young people who are tuning in right now, be a force for good, and think about who you are and what you stand for. And if you have issues or take issue with, injustices that are happening by rampant racism that is being stoked, speak out about it. Because even if your network consists of a couple people, they have a network of a couple people, and they have a network of a couple people. And that is what this is all about. It's trying to be this force. And again, this is such a unique opportunity. There are so many people out there who are truly hurting and who are scared. And, to me, like, what better face than an Asian face to be able to hold your hand and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to do this together. We're all in this together. And if I can help you, please call on me, because I am willing to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, just focusing on this idea that we are all of the same race at the end of the day, and that we need to take care of each other.
Thank you for that. So beautifully said. And also, I love that it's something that we can literally do today, right? It's like literally just be there for somebody else in a really meaningful way. So thank you for that. Michelle, 1 to 3, I'm just kidding, ideas on ways, on ways we can.
I know Bing was saying that to be loud is a generational thing. And I think I'm honestly of a different generation from Bing, because growing up, I think that I still was of that generation of where people sort of said, just stuff it down, don't talk about it. So my advice to people is really to be loud. And I think we always assume that kids today are so woke that they'll kind of call out everything. My fear is that they are sort of being moved a little bit more into this generation of being quiet again because of what's happened. So my advice would be really be loud. When I was bullied in middle school, I had a French teacher who was trying to explain what Chinese people sounded like, and he started making ching chong voices in class. And so no one said a word. I was the only Asian American person in class, and no one said anything. So my hope would be today that either I would say something or someone else would say something. And it is that thing of where we have to just constantly remind each other that if we don't say something and we don't encourage other people to defend us and to help us and to help each other, no one else is going to do it.
I appreciate that. And I also, that's not an uncommon story where the teacher themselves is not educated enough culturally to understand the implications of a racist act. When we started Act to Change, we did 29 listening sessions around the country, and the one story that really stood out for me was a Sikh American student who wore a turban to school, who raised his hand and said, I didn't hear the question. And the teacher said, well, maybe if you took that thing off your head, you'd be able to hear better. And the level of hurt and pain that can cause a student when the person who is supposed to be there to protect you is so awful. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I want to be cognizant of time, and we probably have to end soon, but I just wanted to say, I think there's an idea in journalism that you sort of have to erase yourself and be all factual. And of course, facts are so key. But I also think that all three of you have really used your own platform and your own particular voices to highlight the things that are so important to not only our communities, but to being human beings. So I just want to say thank you so much for all you do. And thank you so much for stopping by today and supporting this day against bullying and hate. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you for what you're doing, Malik.
Thank you.
And Rebecca. Thanks, Malik.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.